I provide financial resources to the household. I get hit by a bus. Like, who's going to take care of my kid? What's going to happen? Maybe you could use that as a segue to introduce some planning concepts around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the base of that we want to start with is just estate planning. That's going to be a huge part of the conversation you should be having as a new parent. Making sure that if you have built up, your wealth over the years, what happens to, if something happens to both parents, who's taking care of the children? Where are those assets going? I would say making sure you have your powers of attorney set up, any deeds in place, making sure you have a trust, beneficiaries on all of your accounts. That's going to be the overarching planning that you should be looking at when you're talking through estate planning.
And so, Gina, estate planning is going to help transition your wealth to your heirs with the goal. Really, I mean, at the end of the day, a large goal for estate planning is to avoid probate and not have the state dictating who gets what assets. It's really a predetermined plan that gets executed because of the trust documents upon your death. There's some benefits to powers of attorney while you're alive, but really, one of the main features is establishing living trusts so that you can very efficiently transition your wealth without the state stepping in.
Absolutely.
And that process is called probate.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the flip side of that is if you're a young family that potentially doesn't have your assets built up, you're kind of still in the wealth accumulation phase of your financial life, let's call it. I would say life insurance is also a very important piece of, you have a young child, you have a new baby, what's the next step? You want to make sure that, if you're the breadwinner, if both spouses are earning an income, or if you're a single parent, I would say it's very important to make sure that you have some type of life insurance in place. And, when we're talking about life insurance, just taking a step back, there's kind of two main types, right? We have the permanent life insurance on one side and term life insurance on the other. So a term life insurance plan is going to be similar to what you have with your employer, right? God forbid something happens to you, that death benefit is going to pay out to your beneficiary. That can be used to replace income in the future, to save for college for the child, to make sure your spouse still has savings for retirement. It can be used for a variety of different things, but that term insurance is going to make sure that your surviving spouse can take care of the kids, can take care of the family. But as the name is called, it's term insurance. So every policy, you're going to have a number of years that you're covered. So it could be 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, depending on the carrier you're using. The opposite side of that would be a permanent insurance plan. And there's a bunch of different, I would say, types that kind of fall under that umbrella of permanent insurance. There's whole life policies, variable life, universal life, and they all kind of have different traits to them, right? So if we're looking at like a whole life insurance policy, it's going to grow the cash value. You could potentially use those dollars in the future. A variable policy is going to do something similar, but that money is actually invested in the markets. Sometimes it has a cap, right? So it could be tied to an index of some sort. But I would say overall, the first step is determining what that death benefit is and kind of backing in the type of life insurance you need to match that. Because what we don't want is you have this huge variable life insurance policy with all these bells and whistles, but you're only 15% covered of what you actually need, God forbid something happened to you.
Yeah, which is probably why term insurance is more popular for younger families because it's more economically feasible, right?
Yeah,
so, absolutely.
And I look at this as I can kind of have my cake and eat it too. I can be insured for the appropriate amount while also working to self-insure myself. So when this term runs up, I will have accumulated enough assets that I've self-insured. I don't need to buy another policy.
Absolutely.
Right. And Matt, I had to put the full court press on you when your firstborn came along with regards to term insurance. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? You're practicing what you're preaching.
Yeah. A lot of people see a little baby in the hospital and we see unfunded liabilities. So we have college, we have a mortgage we want to pay off. We have all these things that we want to provide for. God forbid, should something happen to me.
Yeah.
So there's a real calculation that needs to take place. Like we're not just kind of, sticking our finger up in the air and saying this amount is correct. Yeah. We're trying to analyze, what's the present value of a certain amount of wage base you want to provide, perhaps the mortgage, outstanding principal of a mortgage, college,
retirement.
Unfunded college. So there's a lot more that goes into this than just sitting down and picking a number out of the sky.
Yeah.
There is a real financial planning method here to come up with an appropriate amount.
And what I would say, to throw this out there for young families or professionals that are having babies, the common misconception is, I need $1 million or $2 million of death benefit because it's a round number and it seems like a lot of money. You'd be surprised when you run, the present value of a future earning stream, and you run, adding a mortgage and adding college and enough money for retirement, how large those death benefit numbers actually become. And that's why term insurance is important, because you can get the coverage that you need at a reasonable price. If you were to buy one of those permanent types of policies, it ends up becoming just astronomically expensive. So anything else to add to that? I guess, my overview is, as a young family, get an estate plan done and in good order. And then make sure that your family is covered from a financial perspective, such that if you aren't here economically, they can continue on through the proceeds of something like life insurance. And I think that's where a financial advisor comes into the picture, because a financial advisor can help you determine the appropriate amount of coverage so that your plan is sound.
Yeah, and again, this is a planning process. We're working through a financial model. This isn't, you filling out a questionnaire. Like we're analyzing some, projections.
Yeah. And it's different for everyone.
It's different for everybody. Yeah.
And I'd just like to note too that insurance is not something that's just set it and forget it. As in, we had our first child, we got policies, and now we don't have to worry about it. Because term insurance policies are more affordable, you can layer them. And by that, I mean, maybe this year you get a 20-year term policy. Well, in 5 years, you have another child. You can get another policy that will then continue on past that to cover that child's college. So
yeah. And truly, like, every year matters. I mean, the policy's cheaper at 28 than it is at 38. Mm-hmm. So the sooner you do this, the less you're going to pay.
Yeah, and I guess one final comment on that is there's always a risk of becoming uninsurable. So if you're healthy at 28 or 30, and some unforeseen circumstances arises where you're no longer deemed by the medical underwriters as insurable, you then either have to pay those astronomical premiums because it's more of a risk to the insurance company to cover you, or you don't get insurance. You don't have the option of being covered. So none of us know what the future has in store. So if you're healthy and you're young, there's never going to be a cheaper time to purchase that term insurance and get the appropriate amount of coverage.
Absolutely.